Yo, what's going on, guys? J.Yumeko here, and today we're back with some more The Shell Part 1 Inferno. So, last time we left off, we actually got to our first little investigative bit. A dismembered body of a girl washed up on shore. We took a couple looks at it. We also assuredly figured out decensoring this game. And so then as... Oh, what's the guy's name? I completely forget his name. As our detective guy, our main one. What's his name? Oh my god. Anyways. Oh, actually, you know what I can do? I can go to voice settings, individual characters. Here we go. Okay. So, I believe started off the last video as Uezomi here. So he is a police detective, and he went to go look at the body that had washed up on shore. Then we switched back over to Reiji, who had a little run-in with Toko here, and Toko was like, ooh, you know, I want to hire you to find my true self. And he was like, okay, cool. But some interesting things we got a couple clips of the actual killer in action, and we got a couple interesting little scenes between Toko and Toko. So we'll kind of see how these relationships flesh out. We'll see how the story fleshes out, and without further ado, let's jump right on back into it.
Oh, Reiji, jamasteru.
Wait, turn my volume down. The man sipping coffee on the sofa turned to face me. Oh yeah, I believe Uezomi's now coming to Reiji, because he stumbled across... There was a corpse in the graveyard that was burnt. So now he's approaching Reiji to basically be like, hey, I need your help. Kyozo Uezomi and I were old friends who'd once worked at the same place, and though I'd quit, he was still there. In other words, he was an active police officer.
ご挨拶だな。てめえがあっちを留守になんかしているから、俺が西荻窪組んだりまで来る羽目になっちまったんだろうが。
新宿からそれほど遠いわけじゃないだろう。どうせ四六時中吉祥寺に入り浸ってるんだろ。
We exchanged barbs as I sat on the sofa.
おかえりなさい、兄さん。
Yukari popped out of the kitchen just then, so I took the opportunity to hand over the coffee
ど
beans.
うしてこいつを家にあげるんだ。
寒いのに外で待っていただくわけにもいかないでしょ。
Oops. She placed a steaming cup of coffee in front of me.
それに、魚住さんはお仕事でいらしたんですよ。お話を聞いて差し上げないと。
兄貴とは違ってよくできた妹だよな。
うるさいよ。で、要件は何だ。
I took a sip of coffee and faced Uezomi once more. He wasn't the kind of guy who would ever just come to chat.
どうせろくでもない面倒事なんだろう。聞くだけ聞いてやるからさっさと話せよ。
お前好みの山だよ。
私は席を外しますね。
Sensing our conversation was going to be far from pleasant, Yukari bowed to Uezomi and left the room.
先日な、井の頭公園で
My kind of case, eh? I chomped on a cigarette and lit it. Uezomi followed suit, taking out his own smokes.
もう一つある。
My hand froze just as I was about to lend him a match.
一昨日か。府中の多摩霊園でも女の死体が発見された。
関連は
I wasted no time getting down to business.
ない。手口が全く異なっている。
Uezomi finally lit his cigarette.
井の頭公園で出たやつは胴体以外、両腕と両足、それに頭だった。霊園のはほぼ全身が残っていたが、遺棄された状態が特殊すぎる。
Yeah, from what it looked like, it was just kind of haphazardly shoved in the ground and lit like a bonfire.
どう捨てられていた。
Uezomi wasn't kidding. My heart was throbbing with curiosity. It was only natural he'd known me so well after all the years we'd spent together.
墓地に埋められていた。それだけならともかく、片足だけ地表に出されて火がつけられていた。
I could hear our cigarettes quietly blazing.
何かの見立てか。
やっぱり食いついてきやがったか。
Uezomi chuckled.
だが今のところ何も分かっちゃいねえ。あとは、そうだな。確か左腕が切断されていた。
The left arm had been severed. Okay.
片腕だけか。
お、周囲からは発見されていない。
Well, if I remember correctly, the girl that we saw get dismembered in that little cutscene, she had her left arm chopped off. No, yeah, she had her left arm chopped off. I think her others were left intact, but then she had her womb ripped out. So this might be that girl, or it could be a completely different MO, like you said. I stubbed out my cigarette and crossed my arms. Two murders. It was far too hasty to presume that they were serial killings. And if anything, making that assumption would only limit the scope of suspects, a dangerous move if there ever was one.
お前さんにはタマレーンの件を任せたい。こちらも人手不足でな。
おい、魚住。俺はまだ受けるなんて一言も。
受けるんだろ。
Uzomi sounded so infuriatingly sure of himself.
お前さんが殺しの話で断るはずがねえからな。
そんなことねえよ。
I knew I was just being a contrarian. Of course, I was going to take the case. My brain was already formulating routes of investigation even as we spoke.
動くのは明日からだ。任せたぜ。
ああ。
But man, it'd been ages since I took on such a grisly case. The last time was 6 years ago. I'd failed to apprehend the culprit back then, but I wouldn't make that mistake twice. I'd put this son of a bitch behind bars for those who died, as well as those they left behind. Well, hey, at least we know that he's doing it for a good reason. Not out of some sick sense of, self-fulfillment. After kicking Uezomi out of the house, I had dinner with Yukari before retiring to my room. I heated myself up by the brazier while puffing on a cigarette. My mind was in overdrive, chewing over everything Uezomi had just told me. If this was the work of the same calling card killer, then what significance did that hold? The closest appropriate idiom I could think of was feet to the fire. Then did that allude to the victim being pressured to do something? No. Feet to the fire didn't indicate setting a foot on fire, so that wouldn't add up. Since I hadn't heard all the details, I didn't know exactly how it had been burned. Maybe the way it had been burned was the significant part. Whatever the case, I figured it was best to study all this from another angle for the time being. According to Uezomi, the body's left arm had been severed. Now why was that? If they'd wanted to ensure her fingerprints couldn't be analyzed, they would have cut off both arms instead. So why only one? Maybe there was something special about the victim's left arm. Like maybe she had some sort of tattoo there, or... No. That sounded like something out of a bargain bin mystery novel. Both actions must have held some sort of significance to the culprit, but I was working with far too little information at the moment. Maybe focusing on the dismemberment case instead would prove more fruitful. Now this one was a fair bit easier. Uezomi said she'd been decapitated and hacked limb from limb, which would make it relatively easy to transport the body. It wasn't likely the killer had dismembered the body post-mortem and then disposed of it. As for the missing torso, well, they probably threw it away elsewhere. This culprit was extremely calm and smart despite the grotesque crime they'd committed. However, though I'd surmised that much, I knew any further speculation would be pointless at present. I could have started poking into the victim's acquaintances if only I knew their identity, but for now I had no leads on a suspect. I'd probably have to go back to slumming in my office again once it did too. Thus, I wanted to get a bath in before that happened. My agency didn't have one, so home was the only place I could take a nice hot soak. Then again, there were several soap lamps near the office, but, well, I threw a towel over my shoulder and rose to my feet. But man, it was alarming to hear two incidents like this had happened in such quick succession so close to home. Was it the work of the same killer, or merely coincidence? Only 5 kilometers separated the crime scenes as the crow flew. They were close enough for a single culprit to be responsible for both, but they couldn't have carried the corpses. Did that mean the criminal had a car? Not like that helped narrow down the list of suspects. Tons of people had cars these days. Ah, screw it. Bath first, thinking later.
Hmm?
Holy moly, mother of God.
悪い。
さすがに2人でお風呂に入るには狭いと思いますよ。
No. That's not the problem here, dear sister of mine.
背中くらいでしたら流して差し上げますけれど、どうしますか？
いや、遠慮する。風呂上がったら言ってくれ。
I turned away from Yukari and left the bathroom. Let's linger for a moment. Let's linger for a moment. Ah, beautiful. Picturesque. Picturesque. Alright, moving on.
やれやれ。肝が座ってるというのがなんというか。
I retreated to the living room and flopped onto the sofa. Though she usually had her head on straight, my sister had the brain of a bird at times. It was seriously concerning. I wish she'd have some more shame. Yukari got out a short while later, but just as I was about to enter the bath...
背中流しましょうか兄さん。
いいから。お前は風邪ひく前にちゃんと暖を取っていろ。
Yep, I was right to fear for her future. After getting out of the bath, I returned to my room and warmed myself by the brazier. Man, was I beat. I took a cigarette carton off my desk and grabbed a smoke. Upon lighting it, I tossed the match into the brazier. I breathed a heavy sigh and puffed out a cloud of smoke. It wasn't Uezomi's job that was on my mind at the moment, nor Yukari in her birthday suit, naturally. No, it was that strange girl I'd met in the park. She'd also hired me for a job of sorts.
自分を探してくれ。
Discover her true self. Could she have meant that psychologically? If so, that was way past my pay grade. She'd be better off asking a philosopher or a doctor. Then again, maybe that was a perfectly natural question to have at that age.
兄さん、そろそろ寝ますね。
Yukari opened the door and poked her head in.
ああ、おやすみゆかり。
I'm just wondering why we don't ask Yukari, right? Like, surely she would know. We have the girl's name. We know that she was wearing Yukari's school's uniform. I turned to her. Momentarily, I considered asking her about the girl I bumped into this morning, but thought better of it. Yukari might have known her, since they supposedly went to the same school, but this didn't feel like the right time to ask. And so, I tried tackling it from a different angle.
なあゆかり。本当の自分を探していると言われたらどう思う？
謎かけですか？そうですね。
My sister's features softened.
今ここにいる自分は本物の自分ではないという考えでしょうか。今の自らに不満があり、どこかに幸せな本当の自分がいると思っている。
Yukari answered as she glanced at the ceiling from time to time.
謎かけだとしたら、もっと答えは簡潔でしょうか。
いや、参考になったよ。ありがとう。おやすみ。
おやすみ。
お役に立てたのでしたら幸いです。おやすみなさい、兄さん。
Yukari smiled as she left the room. Not happy with yourself, eh? This Tokokuchiki didn't seem down in the dumps from what I saw of her, which was admittedly very little. Our conversation didn't exactly go very deep, so I couldn't tell if Yukari's analysis was hot or cold. Seriously, just what in the world was going on in that cat-like girl's heart? It tantalized me to no end. March 5th, Wedding Crescent, Neap Tide. I woke up and entered the living room to find breakfast set on the table. Yukari's work, no doubt. I found a piece of paper lodged under a plate of sunny-side-up fried eggs. It read, "Please eat before you go to work. I'll be making dinner too, Yukari." She even wrote with a calligraphy brush, as refined as ever, clearly. The author in question seemed to have already left for school. It seriously sucked to have to get up so early in the morning. I had no idea how I'd survived that period of my life. Oh god, I feel that, dude. At any rate, I decided I'd head for the office as soon as I finished eating. Though it would have been quicker to get to Fuchu from here, I had to pick up my notebook first. I'd have felt naked investigating without it. It also occurred to me that I should summon Uezomi to the office. Traveling around would be all the easier if he brought his car.
さて、行くか。
I gulped down the rest of my cold miso soup, rose from the table, and decided to get going. I took the Seibu line to Shinjuku and headed down Yasukuni Street to my agency. The place was as clean as I'd left it the other day. Yeah, I know. Shocker. I opened my desk and retrieved my notebook. This longtime partner of mine had helped crack many a case over the years. I used it to jot down information on all the people I met and all the intel I gathered. To top it all off, it even came with a handy map. It was everything I could ask for and more. Speaking of which, this seemed like a good opportunity to record everything I'd learned thus far. So I sat at my desk and scribbled away with a
こ
pen.
のくらいか。
I looked up from my notebook just in time to see the hulking shadow of a man behind the glass office door.
おうレジ
Oh, look, Uezomi. What a twist.
こっちは準備できてるぞ。現状を見に行くんだろ。
I stood up, pocketing my notebook.
ああ。と言っても、すでに3日経過しているからな。今更何も残っちゃいないと思うが。
それでも現状に行けば何か見つかるもんさ。
I headed out at Uezomi's behest.
ここからだと中央線で武蔵境まで行って玉川線の玉墓地前で降りればいいな。
ちょっと待て、魚住。
I halted Uezomi in his tracks and glanced
お
around.
前、パトカーで来たんじゃないのか。
Indeed, no such car was anywhere in sight.
トヨペットの新車が配備されたばかりだって自慢してたじゃないか。
バカ野郎、緊急時でもないのに使えるかよ。切符代は出してやるから行くぞ。
わかったよ。
I gave up and followed Uezomi to Shinjuku Station. Much as I wanted to take his new car for a spin, it probably wasn't the smartest idea to risk the public mistaking me for a criminal and getting hauled off for the slammer.
お疲れ様です。お、ご苦労さん。
We reached the crime scene after being greeted by an officer on standby.
ここか。
The graveyard was as silent as, well, the grave. There was a chill looming over the grounds, and it wasn't Winter's doing, that was for sure. Most murder scenes were like that. I wasn't exactly a believer in ghosts and spirits in this era of science, but even I could tell the aura here was off.
さあ調べてくれ。
待てよ。この状態で何を調べろってんだ。
気になったところを調べてみればいいだろうが。
だったらそこをどいてくれ。
I pushed Uezomi's gargantuan frame aside and checked the crime scene. Nothing. There's only one spot that seemed even remotely noteworthy. Ah, here we go. Okay, so just kind of get a layout of what we can check here. We can check the stone wall, we can check all of this, the different tombs, obviously the hole in the ground. Alright, we'll move from right to left then. The cemetery was shrouded by fog. Crows were cawing everywhere, even though Jesus. Even though there had to have been far better places out there to make themselves at home. Jesus Christ, took me
第
5
一
hours.
発見者の供述は取れているのか。
ああ、見つけたのは近所に住んでいるじいさんだ。夜中に墓場で何かが燃えているのに気づいたらしい。最初は鬼火だと思ったんだってよ。
人玉には時期がずれているだろう。
Probably would have made for a rather pleasant evening if it had been summer though.
どちらにせよ仏がいたのは確かだからな。そして通報してきたわけだが。
Okay.
音はどうだ。悲鳴やら何やら聞こえなかったのか。
それもなかったようだな。車は何台か走っていたらしいが、まあ街道沿いだからな。
つまりは車で来たとしても絞りきれないわけだ。
Would have been nice if we could somehow figure out which cars visited the cemetery. That seemed like a pipe dream.
一応調べておいてくれないか。
期待はするなよ。
All right. Yep. Well, maybe throw up some security cameras. Well, some Meiji era security cameras. All right. So I think we've already done these. Just make sure. Yeah. That was probably all I was gonna find in this spot. Okay. Okay. Looks like all that's just background stuff then. Same there. Same there. Same there. I just want to make absolutely sure we're not missing anything. Okay. Time to check the hole in the ground. Part of the ground was excavated and discolored. The hole wasn't that deep though. Just 20 centimeters or so, give or take. Okay.
ここに埋められていたのか。
ああ、うつ伏せで寝かされ、膝下だけが折られて地表に出ていた。そこに火をつけられていたな。何かわかるか？
焦るなよ。後でゆっくりと考えるさ。あと、この辺りに足跡やなんかは残されていなかったのか。
I indicated the ground around the desecrated soil.
発見時に足跡は発見されなかったようだな。念入りに地面が鳴らされていたらしい。
そうか。
Again, just making sure. Nothing there. Anything out of the ordinary in the background? Okay. Okay. I'm just being thorough. I was told that depending on the clues you get and all that fun stuff and how you piece everything together can greatly impact the outcome of the game. So I just want to make sure I'm not missing anything. Although I don't think it'll let me end the investigation until I find everything, but we'll see. Uzomi started issuing orders to the nearby cop after I finished my investigation. The time had come to put my thinking cap on and review what I'd learned. Here we go. Reasoning. Deduce the truth. Okay. Though, with that said, I didn't precisely have much evidence to go off of. It made me wonder if I could even make an arrest when we only had a general profile of the culprit. The first order of business was considering the evidence left at the crime scene. I flipped through my notebook. The only trace remaining of any crime was... what? This is so fucking cool. Okay. The only trace remaining of the crime. Summary, crime scene. I mean, it's a corpse, right? What? That was it! The only trace remaining of the crime. Ugh, okay. It'll be this. Right, the hole in the ground. Oh, okay, alright, sure, the hole in the ground. We'll go with that. It would have been far too shallow to completely bury the body. The culprit simply placed the body down and covered it with dirt, which made it hard to imagine that was done to hide the body. I doubt that was what the killer had in mind, judging from the state in which the corpse was found.
ちょっとシャベルを貸してくれないか
I addressed the nearby cop.
どうぞありがとう
I stuck the tip of the shovel in the ground near the crime scene.
おいレイジ、あまり現場を荒らすなよ。
分かってるよ
I started digging. The ground wasn't all that hard, so it was a simple task. Excavating 20 centimeters or so would hardly take any longer than a jiffy.
時間がなかったのかそれとも体力がなかったのか
I stopped digging and contemplated the matter. No. If time were the issue, they never would have tried hiding the body by digging in a place like this to begin with. But if the culprit was weak, then why would they even bother digging? There had to be some method to their madness, but what? Well, the way I see it, right, they clearly wanted the body to be found. You know, that's kind of where I'm coming from. Face down, the area below the knee was bent, stuck out of the ground, and set on fire. And then they leveled it so no footprints were left behind. Yeah, see? Like a birthday candle.
足が逆さに突き出ているといや、そんな映画があったな。あれは湖だったか？
犬神家の謎だろあれも確か見立て殺人の話だったな
But if that was what we were dealing with, then what in the world was our killer alluding to?
第一発見者の話では、まるでろうそくが
Hey,
松明
like I
のようだ
said,
ったら
a
しいぞ。
candle!
ろうそくね
I hadn't actually seen it myself, so I could only imagine. I pictured a foot blazing brilliantly in the dark cemetery. Maybe it had been some sort of religious ceremony. By this point, the more I thought, the more lost I became. I needed more information.
魚住遺体の解剖は済んでいるのか
Yes, let's get the autopsy, baby. How'd they
司
die?
法解剖と
When
鑑
they
識結
died?
果は明日
What's
わ
going
かるはずだ。
on? Were they tortured?
そうだ。
Was it
お
immediate?
前も明
Were
日
they
は
beat?
体の馬場に来い。
Was it sharp? Bludgeon? Was it a gun? What were we talking about? Alright, what do you say? If results in forensic should be ready by tomorrow. Alright. Uzomi placed a hand on my shoulder like he'd concocted an ingenious plan.
高田の馬場って
There was only one coroner I could think of in all of Takadano Baba, and she just so happened to be the craziest doctor on earth.
他の医者に頼めなかったのかよ
俺に観察医を決める権限なんざねえよ。諦めてくれ。
Said the guy with a shit-eating grin on his face. It was a look that screamed, if I'm going down, I'm taking you with me.
じゃあ 残りは明日だな。
Guess that meant my work was done for the day.
お、また明日。
Excuse me. By the time I said goodbye to Uozomi and made my way back to Kichijoji, evening was already upon me. Now what? Should I make a pit stop somewhere or head straight home? So, Shinjuku, we're probably going to be heading back to the office. Moonworld, we're obviously going to be going to talk with the very attractive lady there. And Kashida Park, we may or may not run into Toko. Let's go to the park. Yeah, let's go to the park. I arrived at Inokashita Park. Though it was chillier than during the day, it was still nice enough for me to enjoy a walk or break here. That just went to show how close spring was. I decided to take a leisurely stroll through the park. But just as I approached the pond...
Yukari?
Oh, Yukari. I saw Yukari frantically reaching for the water from the levee. What'd I just walk into? She really needed to watch herself. I was worried she'd fall into the water at any second. Okay. See what happens or call out to her. I kind of feel like this is innocent either way, so I don't think this is like too big a thing. Let's just call out to her, why not?
何をしてるんだ、ゆかり。
兄さん、手伝ってください。
Yukari faced me, eyes brimming with tears.
どうした？
I moseyed on over to Yukari and studied the pond before us. Carp were poking their heads out of the water, rupturing the surface with ripples.
恋だな。
Had you been feeding them?
溺れてるの。ほら、あんなに口をパクパクさせて。
Yukari. Really? Is this some sort of prank?
なあ。あのな、ゆかり。あれは溺れているわけじゃないんだぞ。
でも、あんなに苦しそう。
Yukari, you're so cute, but...
お前が手をかざすから餌をくれると思って集まってきたんだよ。
まあ、そうだったの。でもごめんなさいね。あいにくと食べられるものは持っていないの。
Yukari apologized to the carp. I was glad she understood, but...
本当にお前は自分の好きなこと以外は全くものを知らないよな。
昆虫の生態でしたら問題ないのですけれど、石鹸水ではアメンボは溺れてしまうとか。
My sister was such an odd bird. Seriously. Yeah. Sitting there thinking that the fish are drowning? She's in high school and she thinks the fish are drowning. Okay. Yukari, my beloved sister. I feel like you should probably be examined for autism. Anyways, Moonworld! Time to go visit my favorite lady. I dropped by Moonworld. It was the perfect place to kill some time. Not only was it literally close to home, but it was also just a single train ride away from my office in Shinjuku. That, and the coffee was good.
いらっしゃいませ。あ、時坂さん。
いや、雨宮さん。
We exchanged greetings before I headed into the cafe. I took my usual seat at the counter.
京子。
Where's Kyoko? But Kyoko was nowhere to be found.
京子さんでしたら出前に行っています。
Why did I even come?
いや、雨宮さんが言っているわけじゃないんだ。
私はまだこの辺りの地理がよく分かっていませんから。
この辺りは狭い道が入り組んでいるからね。散歩でもしながら覚えるといい。
はい。
Hatsune nodded energetically.
あらあら、仲良さそうじゃない。あ、京子さん、おかえりなさい。
Kyoko flashed a teasing smile as she returned from her delivery and made her way behind the counter.
なんだ、焼き餅か。
そうよ。時坂くんに初音ちゃんが取られちゃいそうで。
京子さん。
冗談よ。
冗談はいいから 誰か俺にコーヒーを入れてくれないか？
ごめんなさいね。
Kyoko started preparing coffee on the double. Phew. Now this was the moon world I knew and loved. But that aside, Uezomi sure saddled me with one hard nut to crack. I'd heard this was a deranged crime, but I still hadn't the slightest inkling of what was going on in the killer's head. Why would they set the foot on fire? Why did they take the left arm and nothing else? Were this and the other cases connected? Would there be more crimes like this in the future? Quickly, I realized all I was accomplishing was giving myself a headache. There was no point racking my brains when I barely had enough information to go off of as it was. Kyoko served me my cup.
どうぞ、時坂くん。
Thanks, Mom. Kyoko.
あ
I took a sip of the steaming cup of Joe. The acidic taste stung my throat. After a moment of contemplation, I decided I was in the mood for something a little different today. I reached for the sugar bowl. However, it was empty. I guess I should ask someone to refill it. Ask Kyoko, ask Hatsune, or forget it. Why are we're getting a lot of options suddenly? Well...
Kyoko, darling, can you please refill my cup of sugar?
京子、
Though
砂
you
糖が切れているぞ。
yourself might be enough.
I caught Kyoko's attention and pushed the sugar bowl her way.
あら、ごめんなさいね。初音ちゃん、テーブル席のお砂糖取ってきてくれるかしら。わかりました。
Hatsune bolted over to a table, picked up a sugar bowl, and brought it over as if imitating some cartoon short.
お待たせしました。どうぞ。
ありがとう。
I took the sugar bowl and mixed a few spoonfuls of sugar into my coffee. Pretty good. It was sharpening my dulled senses like a whetstone.
疲れているみたいね。
久しぶりに厄介な仕事だからな。
時坂くんも魚住くんも無茶しやすいたちなんだから気をつけるのよ。
俺は無茶なことはしないさ。もう30だぜ。若い頃とは違うよ。
私だって同い年じゃない。それとも何？私はもう若くないとでも？
そこまで言ってないだろう。
Thus, I was subjected to Kyoko's belly aching until sunset. I love Kyoko. I returned home. The lights were on. Yukari must have returned already. I had suspected what I'd find waiting for me the moment I saw those loafers in the entryway. It was true that I'd considered someone might drop by. I wouldn't have put that note on my agency door otherwise. But still,
どちら様ですか？
a man I'd never seen before was reclining on the sofa. He appeared to be a mild-mannered individual in his 50s. I could instantly tell that he wasn't some kind of burglar. Besides, not even Yukari would be naive enough to serve coffee to an intruder.
ああ、これは時坂玲二さんですね。
Oh,
私は
Vice
大
Principal.
場女
What
学
are you
院
doing
に
here?
教頭しております。
The man rose to his feet and politely bowed. Obergirls Academy. That was Yukari's school. What in the world was its vice principal doing here?
まさかとは思いますが、ゆかりが何か問題を起こしたのですか？
違いますよ兄さん。
Yukari popped in from the kitchen.
時坂さんは優秀ですよ。部活動でも皆をよくまとめています。
佐伯先生は兄さんに仕事の依頼があるそうです。
Job offer. Maybe, well, I guess that's how we're going to get involved with Obas,
仕事？
isn't it?
はい。時坂さんのお兄さんが探偵業を営んでいらっしゃると聞き及びまして。
Psyche looked dead serious. Well, I guess it wouldn't kill me to hear him out at least. After all, some jobs were simple enough where all I had to do was give some advice and then bam, done. And even if it wasn't that easy, I could just refer him to the guy in Ueno. Problem solved. Whatever the case, I wouldn't want to slight someone who came all this way to ask me for my
どう
help.
いったご用件でしょうか？
I gestured Psyche back to the sofa and quickly followed suit. Yukari watched from afar with a tinge of concern in her eyes.
ええ、大場女学院でのことなのですが、今年に入ってから学生が2名相次いで失踪してしまい。
失踪？
Well, I'm gonna take a wild guess and say Toko and Toko.
まず1月の半ばに西園結衣という学生が行方不明となり
Oh,
ました。
completely different people.
そして2週間前、今度は今村遥という学生がいなくなりまして。
Well, All right, let's really rack our brains for this killer of a puzzle. 2 bodies, presumably both female, one confirmed female, pop up randomly. Identities of which we still don't exactly know. And then all of a sudden, the principal of the girls' academy comes along and says, "Oh hey, by the way, 2 of my students have gone missing, and I have no idea where they are." Saiki laid out the facts with the practiced concision of a professional.
警察には
もちろん伝えてあります。ですが、一向に進展がなく、ですからこうしてここへ来たのです。
そうですか。
Couldn't say I blamed the police though. They were probably trying their best. It's just that due to many different possibilities for disappearances, running away, kidnapping, suicide, homicide, accidents, it was nearly impossible to scrounge up information without witnesses.
誠に恥ずかしい話なのですが、我が学院は世間体というものを気にするあまり、2人目の今村さんがいなくなるまで表立って動いていませんでした。
Saiki dolefully hung his head.
自分に謝らないでください。謝るとしたら行方不明となっている学生さんのご家族でしょう。
分かっているのですが。
Saiki's voice crawled to a whisper. This had to have been rough on him as well.
2人の行方不明者ね。
Wait a second.
現在別件で殺人事件を扱っています。そこで身元不明の少女の遺体が2つ。
まさか。
まだわかりません。まだ。
Mother. Saiki practically sprung off the sofa upon hearing what was surely the first potential lead he'd had in ages, but I held out my hand and just shook my head.
ですが可能性は捨てきれません。佐伯先生、このご依頼お受けいたします。
If these cases turned out to be connected, then I'd be killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Death was still staring me straight in the face, yet my mind was working out its next course of action as coolly as ever.
ありがとうございます。ところで、あと一つお願いがあるのですが。
何でしょう。
実は、これ以上の被害を出さないためにも、学院内部で調査をしていただきたいのですが。
話がよく見えないのですが。
学生たちに不審がられぬよう、臨時講師として学内に入ってもらいたいのです。
臨時講師。
So that's how we get into school. I was still pretty fucking dead on in my prediction, because I had said that through investigating this, we would probably see victims come from Oba Girls Academy, and that's how we would get involved in investigating them. And I was exactly right. So, what can I say? I played a couple of visual novels in my time. I wasn't following.
聞けば、時坂さんは世界史に造詣が深いとか。ですから世界史の講師として学内で目立たぬよう調査活動を行っていただきたいのです。
それは
It would probably prove quite difficult. Even if the 2 cases did happen to be connected, keeping me bound in one place would very likely curtail me from investigating the murders.
兄さん、私からもお願いします。
Yukari chimed in just as I was wrangling over the matter.
大丈夫、心配するな。
I turned back to Saiki.
どなたか教師の中で女学生の行動や心理を把握していらっしゃる方はいますか。
養護教諭でもよろしいですか。
Oh, her? Oh, yes, please.
十分です。その方にはお話を伺うことも多くなるでしょうから、こちらの仕事内容も伝えておいてくださいますか。
それはつまり、その他の教師にも内密にしておくということでよろしいですか。
そうですね。ご理解が早くて助かります。
わかりました。それでは。
何分他の調査もありますので、常勤というわけには参りませんが、できる範囲で協力したいと思っています。
もちろんです。それでは、非常勤講師として赴任するということで、よろしくお願いいたします。
We got up and exchanged handshakes. It seemed things were about to get real busy around here. Talk about it. I returned to my office in Shinjuku on the last train after Saiki went home. We decided that I'd begin my investigation at Obergirls Academy on the 8th. I still had plenty of time until then, so I had to accomplish everything else I could in that time. The first order of business was checking the results on the autopsy tomorrow. Uezomi told me to head to Takadano Baba. There was a medical coroner I knew who worked there. It's just, man, weird didn't even begin to describe her. If it weren't just for work, I would have filed a restraining order on her eons ago. I turned off the lights, flopped onto my sofa, and wrapped myself up in a blanket. As I faded into the deep embrace of sleep, my mind flashed back to my fiancé, who was taken from me 6 long years ago. Oh shit. Oh, here we go, our little reading.
街を歩く。市電が通り過ぎていく。どの路線も色をなくした人でいっぱい。少し前までは華やかな着物を身にまとった人も多かったのに、今はもうモノクロームの人の群れ。サイレント映画のように誰も何も喋らない。
That wasn't even me. Skip that. That just cut off.
華やかな色を。この閉塞した世界を明るく変える色を。そのくらいしか私にはできないから。
Again, my running theory is that this is Toko.
私は青がいいと思った。あの人は赤がいいと言った。
But he says red is perfect. Yikes, that's a little bit ominous. And, you know, my theory that it's Toko saying all this... Now, I will say the only reason I say that I think that's Toko talking there is because of all of the artsy stuff in the background, and she's been pretty depicted as an artist. So that's why I kind of felt like that. But I will also say that little ending bit makes me a little bit suspicious that maybe, well, for one, it's either that is Toko and it's just I'm overthinking this, or maybe this is the killer that's talking. Because I mean, that little bit at the end there, oh, I think blue would be pretty, but he says red is perfect. Like, yeah, that's very much something a killer would write. Especially when we're talking about, when we're relating it back to the scene that we saw with the killer, where they were talking about, oh, you know, you used to be so pure, right? Like, so it seems this killer has an obsession with purity. And, you know, that hence the whole thing with them digging out like the girl's womb and all that, right? Like, this is all a big message of purity. And as a byproduct, I'd imagined also what is it? I'd also imagine that it's something with tainting that purity. So that's kind of where I'm at right now with with my own theory. So I guess we'll just have to see. But God, excuse me. I woke up to the most nauseating sight imaginable.
やっと起き上がったか。
朝っぱらからむさ苦しい顔見せるんじゃねえよ。
How's that? Okay.
てめえが起きねえからだろうが。
お前が来るのが早すぎるんだよ。
もうすぐ昼だぞ。ほら、とっとと起き上がれ。
I wonder how we're gonna do as a teacher, because we gotta wake up even earlier than the students, really. I reluctantly stood up.
仕方ねえ。行くか。
After changing into a wrinkled button-down shirt, I left my office.
おい、上住。
どうした？
パトカーで来たんじゃないのか。
I saw no cop car parked near the office.
だから緊急時以外に使わねえって言っただろうが。くだらねえこと言ってねえで。
Uezomi grabbed my arm and hauled me off. However, he led me north of all
おい、
places.
上住。 駅は西だろ
高田の馬場だったらここから歩いた方が早いだろうが。
Uzomi said that like it wasn't his problem.
う。
Bastard.
2キロ以上はあるだろうが。電車を使わせろよ。
口を動かしている暇があるなら足を動かせ。
Alright, hold up. For all my Americans out there, 2 kilometers to miles. Don't blame me for not knowing the conversion rate. Oh, 1.2 miles. That's actually not bad. That's actually pretty short. Oh, come on, man. You're complaining about barely over a mile. Come on. He wasn't going to listen to me at all, it seemed. This, when it'd be so simple to just take the Yamada line on the police's line tab, too. Jeez, I can't speak. Okay. I gave up and settled for glaring daggers into Uezomi's back as I followed him. When we arrived in Takanobaba after a 30-minute stroll up Meiji Street,
体が温まっただろ。
腹減った。
since I'd gone on a long walk right after waking up, my appetite was a far greater concern to me than warmth.
飯だったら諦めな。これから行くところを考えれば食わない方がマシだぜ。
分かってる。
Grabbing a bite to eat just before hearing an autopsy report didn't sound very appealing, that was for sure. This place was not for the faint of heart, especially to those who blew chunks just hearing about gore. And to make matters worse, you could very well end up an audience to a live autopsy if you played your cards wrong.
レイジ、お前が先に行けよ。
お前が行けよ。警官だろ。
お前の方が扱いは慣れているだろう。
We were negotiating right in front of the clinic for some reason,
最近来てないから入りづらいんだよ。
though there was more to it than just that, of course.
いいから行けよ。
待てよ。まだ心の準備が。
何しとるん？
A country accent? A voice suddenly ambushed us from
お
behind.
人の顔見てひねることあらへんやろ？時坂はん？
いや、いきなりだったからつい。
God, I might just die so she can perform an autopsy on me. Good lord. I turned around and apologized to the woman, Natsume.
むっちゃ傷つくわ。うちかて一生懸命なのに。
何ですか？
時坂はんが来る言うからせっかくおめかしまでしとったんよ。
You know, it's kind of funny after listening to so much like Japanese, like in animes and visual novels and stuff. I can kind of pick apart. I can kind of like identify the accents that they're supposed to have, which is kind of interesting.
俺は単に鑑識の報告を聞きに来ただけですがね。
あら、そうなん？しゃあないな。二人ともお入り。
Natsume winked at us before creeping back into the clinic.
やっぱりレイジに任せるわ。あの人の応対は。
やれやれ。
Yada yada. We were taken not to a waiting room or a sick room, but rather the very heart of the operation itself, the autopsy/operating room. Though I'd never heard of any actual surgeries happening here, so just an autopsy room probably sufficed.
押して、何が聞きたい？
井の頭公園と多摩霊園の仏のことだ。レイジのやつが詳しく知らんから一つずつ行こう。
せやな。ほな最初のバラバラから行こうか。
Natsume grabbed a stack of papers off her desk after she said that. I whipped out my notebook in preparation.
2月29日未明、武蔵野市吉祥寺の井の頭公園で若い女性のものとみられる遺体。胴体は未だ発見されていない。池もさらったそうだが、関係すると思われるものは一切出てこなかったそうだ。
身元は分かっているのか？
それが分かってへんねん。頭残うとる言うても腐ってボロボロやしな。
妙なところ？
まだまだ寒い季節やろ。ほいでもウジが成長しすぎてんねん。
Natsume flipped through her documents.
腐敗の進行は2月末ということを考えると死後1週間以内や。せやけどウジの大きさはだいたい1センチ。
誤差じゃないのか
2倍の違いは誤差言わへんよ。まあ冷凍保存されてたら分からへんけど、そうなると腐敗もウジの成長も止まっとるやろしな。
That was indeed curious. Okay, wait, so... I mean, so far things... I mean, I'm really not gonna go so far as to say that these aren't going to end up being the bodies of the two students that went missing, because let's be completely honest here, that's clearly who they are. But I mean, it is still nonetheless lining up. The body is supposedly a week old, and one of the bodies, or one of the girls that went missing, has been missing for around a week. But then they're saying the maggots are 2 months old, at least, which tells me maybe they're breeding the maggots, maybe they had them already, or maybe they even took the maggots off of a previous body and then put them onto this one, something along such lines.
あとな、一応指紋は取れたんやけど、警視庁にあるリストじゃ該当者は見つからなかったらしいで。
捜索願いが出されていても指紋などの資料は揃わんからな。
ま、他にいくらでも調べる方法はあるからええんやけどな。
I was about to say dental records.
血液型は？
ほとんど血残うとらへんかったけど、一応 A 型っちゅうことはわこうとるで。
I nodded as I scrawled all that down.
他に特筆すべき点は
あるで。考えようによっちゃ、これが一番重要かもわからへんな。
生きている間に足を切られたってことか。
せやな。でもな、腕からは生活反応が出てへんのや。
So, they most likely cut off the legs. Obviously, you have some pretty major fucking blood vessels in the legs. So she probably either bled out and died or was killed from the shock, or was knocked out from the shock and then bled out and died unconscious.
足を切断され、
Yep.
出血多量で死亡。その後腕と頭部を切断。
かもしれへんな。
次は3月2日、府中市の多摩霊園で発見された遺体だ。こちらも被害者は若い女で、左腕を切断されて埋められ、足には灯油をかけられて火をつけられていた。
This was the murder I'd investigated.
こっちはなんぼかわかりやすいんよ。なんせ仏さんがほとんど残っとったし。
はっきりしていること？
まあ順番に行こうか。まずは死亡推定時刻やね。こいつは3月1日夜7時から0時までとはっきりしとるんよ。
If I remember correctly, the principal said the other student went missing sometime in February, so still very possible. Oops. Natsume sounded very sure of herself.
ほら、足に火つけられとった言うやろ。それで足の筋肉に再硬直の跡があったんよ。死後5時間以内に人工的に硬直を解いたっちゅうわけや。
火をつけた時に動かしたということですね。
おそらくな。せやから発見時から遡って5時間以内に殺されたっちゅうのが確実や。
死因は左腕を切られたからですか？
左腕の切断面にも生活反応はあったんやけどな。他にもあったんよ。腹がかっさばかれて内臓、子宮が切り取られとった。
Yeah, so that's, like I said, that's the Vic that we saw. I knew this was gonna be a grotesque case, but I never could have imagined that.
それだけやない。空っぽになったお腹の中に卵の殻が入れられとった。
黒い卵の殻。
Why would the killer do something like that?
それを調べるのが探偵派の仕事やろ。うちはただ死体からわかることを調べるだけやもの。
そうですね。
This could have very well been an important clue in nailing the culprit.
出刃包丁で切除したみたいやね。わざわざ縫合までしとったけど、普通の裁縫糸やったわ。専門的な道具は一切使われてへん。
左腕を切断したのは
断面の骨がひしゃげとったさかいな。ナタのような重い刃物やろな。あとな、子宮が取り出されてた言うたやろ。
どういうことですか？
調べてみたらな、成功の跡があったんよ。ただし精子の生存は確認できひんかったから、強姦殺人の線は捨ててもいいはずやで。
ただ遺体は黒い布に包まれただけの全裸だったから、わいせつ目的という線も捨てきれていない。
そうか。少しでも犯人に近づく手がかりはないのか。
せやね。肝心なの忘れとったわ。 仏さんの身元な、1日の夕方からいなくなってた小泉慶っちゅう学生さんや。
身元が分かったんですか？
腐敗もしとらんかったから判別は容易やったんよ。
Natsume tossed the documents onto the desk.
今んとここんなもんやね。時に時坂はん、最近あの子に会うた？
She abruptly changed the subject.
あの子ってあいつですか？
There was only one person I knew whom Natsume ever called that.
せやせや、お土産があるんやけども、ちょいと持っていってくれへん？
なんで俺が。自分で持っていけばいいじゃないですか。
It wasn't like you lived all that far away after all.
だってあの子照れややさかい、なかなか会うてくれへんのやもん。
知りませんよ。魚住にでも頼めばいいじゃないですか。
魚住はんはおまわりさんやさかい、こないなこと頼めへん。
A chill ran down my spine. Whatever this was, I wanted no part in it.
なあ、うち時坂はんしか頼れる人おらんねん。
I tried to turn to Ozomi, but the sneaky bastard had bailed on me.
ああ、わかりましたよ。届ければいいんでしょ、届ければ。
おおきに時坂はん、この借りは今度ちゃんと返すさかいね。
Damn it. This is why I didn't want anything to do with this. It was already evening by the time I left.
腹減った。
I still hadn't eaten all day.
時坂はん、お土産の中は食べちゃあかんで。
食いませんよ。
I was about to leave with the package in my hand when I suddenly noticed something.
夏目さん、看板がおかしくなってますよ。
The clinic sign read Akashiro Clinic.
おやまあ、しゃあないな。やっぱ適当にやったんが間違いやったかね。
Natsume sighed as she looked up.
開業するときに土片つければ済むし、ちょうどよかったんやけどな。
そりゃ適当に書いただけだったら雨が降れば消えるでしょうが。
ほいなら油性ペン持ってくるさかい。時坂はん書いてな。
なんで俺が。
ええからええから。ちょいと待っとき。
Natsume headed back into her clinic. I sighed wearily. I wanted to leave, but knew that it'd only make things worse for me in the long run. And so, with great reluctance, I brought out a stepladder from behind the building.
お待たせ。ほいじゃ、よろしく頼みますぜ。
はい。
I placed the ladder against the wall, climbed it, and added the missing letter.
ああ、そっちの看板も頼みますぜ。
Natsume barked out orders as she played around with the sign on the
こ
ground.
れでいいですよね。
やっぱ自分の名前が入ってると気合の入りようも違うんやろ。時坂探偵事務所の探偵班？
だったら夏目委員にでもすればよかったじゃないですか。
あかん。うちは兄弟行さんおったさかん、下の名前で呼ばれなわからんくなんねん。だからちゃんと夏目ちゃんって呼んでな。
Not suck me.
んな呼び方したことありませんから。
Listen, man. You got a lot of girls in this. But I'm saying we got two women in here that are drop dead. Alright? That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying, brother. Oops. I returned to the office feeling a bit tipsy thanks to the dinner I forced Oizome to treat me to.
さて、
Guess I better go over everything that's happened. I kicked back my chair as I flipped through the notebook. Alright. The first order of business was poring over the day's autopsy reports. Though the dismembered body found in Inokashita Park was outside my jurisdiction, I was still curious about the victim's ID. The murder was believed to have occurred 7 to 10 days prior to the body's discovery. There was some small room for error, but the time frame was almost certainly accurate. So, with that in mind, did I have any leads on who our mysterious Jane Doe could be? Yes, we do. Let's see here. Midway. So exactly. This was the girl that we saw murdered. In that little cutscene there. So the only other person it could be is Haruka Imamura. That's right. Her. Haruka Imamura. Her disappearance matched up with the estimated time frame of the murder. but it was just a possibility. I'd have to look into this some more. After all, I didn't even have a remote idea of what this killer was like. However, as for the other murder, there was one clue that granted me insight into the culprit. It was... it was the black egg, obviously, right? The black egg that was supposedly in the victim's abdomen. Maybe it was a hint, but I didn't know enough about it to say anything for sure at this point. Even if it wasn't ironclad proof, was there anything else that might tell me something about the killer? Vital reaction, torso not found. I would say probably just that information there, right? Psychic job request. It's cut open. Maybe this? The fact the victim's uterus was removed. There we go. That meant that the killer held some kind of grudge against or hated pregnant women. Or just women, plain and simple. Though things weren't usually that simple, I figured it at least painted a partial portrait of the culprit. However, that only applied to the Thomas Cemetery killing. I still didn't have enough information to draw any conclusions about the dismembered body in Inokashita Park. Maybe it wasn't entirely relevant, but it was somewhere to start when it came to links at least. It seemed I really did need to pay Obagirl's Academy a visit. If there was even the slightest chance that the missing students were connected to this case, then investigating from that angle seemed like the best idea. Alright, I guess that's what we'll do. That'd have to wait for tomorrow, though. I looked at the package I had left on the desk.
上野にでも行くか。奴の嫁さんも妊娠したらしいからな。
But man, oh man. Why do the Takeshito siblings have to be such a pack of weirdos? Alright, so we got one more day until we start our official investigation. We are going to go ahead and stop here. So, a lot of interesting stuff has happened, though. We're finally getting into the real meat and bones of this story. And we're kind of finally getting to see where it's going. First off, I'd like to say this is a lot more gruesome and grisly than I thought it would be. A lot of times when you play games like this, where it's like, oh, there's a murder and you gotta figure out who the murderer is, it's something fairly stereotypical, like, they were stabbed or they were shot and you have to find it. It's something pretty typical like that. But I mean, this is like some real deranged shit, right? Like, oh, well, he sawed off both her legs while she was still alive. And then let her bleed out and then proceeded to dismember her body bit by bit. And then, even before that, he raped her. And then, with this other girl, right, he chops off her arm for God knows what reason, cuts open her stomach, pulls out her uterus, and then puts an egg in there and sews it back up. I mean, this is like some legitimately deranged shit here. I mean, it's it's very graphic. I honestly, I kind of see why why Steam wanted to, put a censor on it, because god damn, it's fucking grisly. But as for just some starter, like, who do you think done it? Who done it kind of stuff? Again, I think the most interesting little tidbit that we got from this episode is the bit where, again, they were like, oh, I think everything's bland and a little bit of blue would make everyone look better, but he said red would look perfect. So we still have this voice. We don't know who's talking. Again, I'm still theorizing that this is Toko talking here. And clearly Toko plays a very important part in this story because, I mean, she's literally right here at this, front page of it. So Toko's going to play an extremely important part in it. But that little tidbit just kind of makes me very suspicious of whoever that narrator is. And again, I think it's Toko. So, somebody that has access to the girls at Obagirl's Academy. Somebody that is connected to that story with the egg, which clearly Toko is. I mean, look at this title screen here. So it's kind of lining up here. It's kind of lining up. Again, I don't think it's necessarily going to be as cut and dry as, oh, Toko's the killer, you know, end of story. But there's something going on with her, clearly. So, but that's all stuff that we got to figure out in the next episode here. So thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, make sure to leave a like on the video and tell me in the comment section below what you'd like to see me play next. If you enjoyed this video or any other videos or series on my channel, then I highly recommend that you hit the subscribe button and turn on post notifications so you'll be notified when one of those videos comes out. Anyways, that's it from me, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.